Going on. Fantastic. Right, so financial matters 2114-01 to receive the accounts for September 2021. Are there any points of issue on any of these?
I have to admit, I put all my effort into the budget and I decided to just run with the September accounts.
It was hard to know which accounts were which
Just
accounts, but
too much other work.
there are lots of numbers there, that's good. That's all we need to do, isn't it, to receive them?
Yeah, I mean, I shall
Yes,
start in
vote on
great
the
detail in
payments.
October, Paul, so don't think this can't happen.
The September budget will be the same as the budgets we've set.
Exactly, they're in there anyway, so who's using them?
But we don't need to vote on payments or anything?
No. I mean, I don't know. Well, when you get to the budget bit, if you go scroll down to that bottom,
Yeah.
that will sort of give everybody a bit of an idea of where we are anyway.
Okay, so do we move on to the grant application for livestock? Or do we have to go into camera?
Sorry?
Do we move into grant application publicly?
Yeah, that's all public, yeah.
So to approve the grant application for the Annual Festival of Literature 2114-02. David?
Can I propose that we pay them the £500 they've asked for?
Can I propose that we don't?
David,
I could see no
hang on,
reason.
let's see David's back in his proposal first.
I mean, it's an event that is like an annual institution. It's been supported by the town council for very many years. It's a very modest sum. And in a sense, because the event is quite widespread, the town council gets quite a lot of publicity for its £500. And we've got plenty of money in the budget and we can afford it. I would commend it on that basis.
Liz, the counter argument.
Counter argument is that they have plenty of money. They have made no specific proposal as to how they would spend it. And it feels like it's just a habit and an expectation on their part that it will always be forthcoming. And if that's how grants are going to be given, that could be a policy that the council has. But if each is to be considered on its merits, I don't see the merit given their level of reserves.
So they have got money, and they're not stunted. They used to do it in a couple of weeks, didn't they? It used to be great for the festival, it used to be 2 weeks, but that was a long time ago. But they're doing it on Zoom at the minute, I believe.
They say they're moving back
Yeah, but
towards
that,
public.
yeah, also when they do it, and I think they've got plenty of money myself, actually, for £500 to them. They can afford that. If they wanted 15,000, I might think, we'll think about it, but not 500 quid.
Paul, David.
I think it's a community issue we should support. It may well mean we only get our name in their leaflet, but I think it's important that the town seem to be supporting any of our local groups, whether it's £500, £1,000, whatever. And I would second David's proposal, so Councillor Chappell's proposal.
Could I just add, I mean, when you look at what they say the approximate cost is, which is 15,000, if they took the whole of that out of their current resources of 22, it would leave them so short that they wouldn't have the money to cover the following year in reserve, which I think probably an event like that needs. And that's why I think it is justified, notwithstanding the amount that they hold. Because frankly, £500 against the cost of 15,000 is it's not a drop in the ocean, but it's not a huge amount.
What are they spending £15,000 on in the no COVID year?
Well, I think they've said that on the assumption that it is
Plus
a
they get income from
non-COVID event.
tickets, don't they? So there's an offset.
I think their income is about 15,000 as well, if I read it correctly.
I'm not being negative about it, I'm just saying that, to me, the application, I don't want to make it any bureaucratic, but I agree with Councillor Holland. I think this is a bit like, well, we always do, so just, can you give us the money?
Can we quickly dip in, Jerry, have you got the views?
I have strong views. I think I'm inclined to support granting it, and I think yes, maybe it is a habit, but it's, that is the policy that we have adopted over many years. I think it's, if we're going to change the way that we are doing, supporting, issuing grants to local cultural activities, then we need to have some all that discussion about whether we're doing it or not, because this is going to come up every time one of our grant applications comes through, because lots of local groups rely on a contribution from the council to help them do what they do. So for that reason, I would support it.
About your
Can I say just one thing? We used to have 2 weeks, we used to have an adult week and a kidlit week. We now only have a kidlit week because years ago the Arts Council persuaded us to do an all-year programme.
Are you part of the festival,
Which festival?
the Literature Festival?
I am.
That's
That's one of the people who started it.
So you need to declare that,
She
don't you?
did
I
it.
did.
Yeah.
That's what she said, she was.
We don't always apply every year. It's not, in fact, it's the wrong idea to say that we get the grant every year, we don't. But what we have been doing and what we found we did free over COVID was do the Lit Fest. We actually made it free to all the schools because we wanted to try and help with the situation we were in with the COVID. So that actually cost us a lot of money. We made a conscious decision to pay that money in order to support the schools over the COVID situation. And one of the other things that we do is we support the transport of children from the schools, because they're all very short, into the events that we hold during the Kidlit. I'm not begging or anything. I'm just saying that that's
That's the information.
that's part of what we spend the money on.
Okay, so we have a request to approve the grant, so we have to go to a vote.
Yeah, you've got a proposer and a second.
Proposer and a seconder. Yes, I think there are arguments on both sides. So, can we have those that support the motion, please? And those against? That's not voting, I'm going to abstain. So, it gets passed. Thank you very much indeed. To receive a letter from Northampton regarding the Welcome Back Fund grant. This is their very welcome grant of £4,250 that we were asked to apply for 8 months ago or something. And consider the ideas of how we will utilise the funds. We've all had the letter to have a look at. The suggestion at the moment, is it okay to share this with everyone?
Yeah.
Is one of the things we applied for is something the Business Association were keen on, and it seems like a really good project. We can do lots of different things like the museum and the various schools and the heritage trail, etc. Is developing a walking tour around the town. Use the Love Angle website to push that out to encourage people in, maybe add cycling to it later on, etc. Annual Business Association have done a lot of work on that. There's some running costs, but the setup costs are covering that first year of 4,650, which is one of the two things we applied for. And the other one we are suggesting is to support some of the events at the Christmas market, Santa's Grotto, the reindeer, etc., to try and encourage footfall in the town, etc., etc. And that sounds good on all fronts. So we don't need to vote on this, do we?
No, yeah, gonna,
Is everyone okay with those two suggestions? That comes to £4,250 odd, which is strangely exactly what we need, so that's perfect. Lovely, thank you very much indeed. Right, 1404 to consider a budget. Do we need to go back into the camera for this?
not for the budget, no.
Not for the budget. Cool. Jerry.
Just clarify the thought if I can. At the moment, you've just put a 3% split and everything to come up with the starting point.
Yeah, that's up to you to decide.
Well, yeah, I mean, I would have thought it would be more appropriate to use 5% for salaries, given that's what we've been advised by NCALC. And I know we hopefully will have a final number before we finalise the budget, but at least we need to do that. I sent a note out very late before this meeting about energy.
Yes,
in theory, energy should be fixed because we fixed it for 2 years, or electricity, or 3 years for gas. I think there's a risk that Crown and Energise, that's the right name, is that the right name? Anyway, sorry, it's written down, Positive Energy. Certainly Positive Energy look like they're in trouble. So must be a risk there that turns out not to be a fixed price contract, so they go bust. We'll get a supplier of last resort appointed by Jim, and we'll know the moves are 2 year fixed contract. My personal view is that we shouldn't budget for them going bust. If it happens, then we'll have to draw on reserves. There's something that's unforeseen, out of control.
And it's unpredictable what the price will be.
Crown is I did have a quick look to see if I could find anything on Crown. I didn't find any worrying news items like I did on Positive about Crown, but obviously they're not on EDF. I mean, I think pretty safe on EDF. I can't see them reneging on that contract, but there must be a risk with Crown. So again, my suggestion would be we assume that it's a fixed price, so we don't put any inflation in because we know what prices are for next year. And if they do go bust and we end up with a supplier, then they'll get a whole lot of pain. So
Let's hope.
let's hope we don't, yes.
So we changed the salary percentages, and fingers crossed on the energy, but we don't need to budget for anything yet. They seem good starting points.
I'd put a hedge risk in about the energy, personally, because I think the world's going to change in the next 6 to 8 weeks.
We do have a contingency budget, don't we?
We've always got,
Budget neutral.
we always try and we build in a few things to cover us.
But also by the time we're approving this December, January,
December, January.
quite a lot's changed in the last 2 weeks, so a lot might change in the next 2 months.
Yeah.
So I mean, maybe we just keep a watching brief on that and see where it stands next meeting.
As a rough guide, do you want to use 3% budget or no percent or?
I think it's going to be inflationary pressures in general in the next 2 months.
As soon as fuel goes up, everything does.
Like 5% probably inflation by Christmas, supply chain pressures and all that kind of stuff.
Certainly looking like 4%
At least.
minimum, isn't it? So 3% might have been a bit conservative, unfortunately.
So do you want a couple of columns with 3%, 5%, or you tell me?
Can I come in from another angle?
Yeah.
I think we have a reputation, if I'm honest, of being an expensive council. And I think keeping the preset rise this year to low was good. And I think we should try and ambitiously mirror that this year if we can, knowing that we probably won't be able to. But in other words, to try and keep the preset rise as low as we can.
So we
Because I'd imagine Northumberland's are going to splurge on their council tax, potentially. So I think if we can do 3% this month and then maybe see how it looks, that would be my suggestion.
I'm a bit worried about that because we did that last year and I think we will get into a position where there's already one project that I've seen today on an email, which we're talking potentially could be £68,000. You can't just say, right, we're going to take this money out of our reserves. Because okay, our reserves are healthy, but you're going to just wipe them away and then next year you may have to then say 20%.
I don't think I'm saying that at all. I think I said that we should try and have an ambition of doing something. And it's scary when we start looking down the number there and judging by some of the conversations I heard at the NCAP meeting the other week. There's going to be pretty high rises coming from further up. And if we can say that we've done our darndest to cut some of these sections to the bone and spend wisely, and only...
But our increase is, our increase is quite a lot smaller, even though you may put it up, let's say you put it at 10%, it's a much smaller amount for the taxpayer than what the unitary council will be doing.
No, I understand, but I think we need to be really clear that that's it, because again, someone was talking to me today saying that, you know, we pay the special council tax and what do we get from it? And you have to say that that's not us, that's something else. I'm not saying that we're going to succeed, but I think we should try and at least be ambitious to cut things where we can. I mean, when you look at some of the details of what we do pay at the moment, it seems that there's a lot of, you know, we spend a lot of money on towels, which, you know, if we can,
On,
towels,
Towels.
towels.
We don't buy any towels.
Well, we've got, in the budget, we've got £1,900 and something pounds for towels at the courthouse.
What?
Where is it? It's in here somewhere. Under annual contracts, no. Put it in here somewhere.
it's
I
on
don't
the
think, I don't think it's about the odd £1,900, though, is it?
No,
We appear to
but-
be talking about the principle of how the budget will be constructed. And whether you go for 3% or 5%, and I understand, you know, that will then influence what the precept will be, but it's about how you then use that to control what you actually do next time. So I think the 68,000 is an interesting one to look at, that if that wasn't budgeted this year, then the money is not available unless we make a special resolution to spend it from reserves. And looking at the hub project, I have said, I completely understand we're not going to commit ourselves to any major amount of money that isn't already in the budget, because it hasn't been budgeted that the hub will reopen. So when we're thinking about the principles, it's also about knowing that that will guide us next year on the decisions. And you know, the skateboard park would have to be entirely funded by grants, and it's that knock-on, not looking at individual £1,900.
David?
Yeah.
Whilst I'm sympathetic to the idea of setting sort of financial targets and saying that increase should be limited to X% or Y%, actually you've also got to look at it from the perspective of we're here to do something for the town. And actually, what we should be looking at, arguably, is prioritising in what areas we want to spend. And then we worry about where the money's coming from. If it can't come, then we have to think again. But actually, the thing should be driven by what we do, not only what we currently do, but what it is that we would want to be doing next year and the year after and so on. And that sort of takes us back to ideas of forward planning and so on. But I think we do need to set sort of some sort of targets for ourselves about what we do or don't want to move forward with. Now the skateboard park is clearly one thing, and that would be a decision that the council as a whole will end up having to take. But I almost prefer to see us at this stage going to the committees and going to council and saying, right, we are putting together a budget and we need very quickly costed projects if you want them to be included in next year's budget. Frankly, people should be doing that already.
Yeah, just on that basis, I quickly drew up a shopping list the other day, and I reckon, yeah, we could spend another £130,000 just in the blink of an eye, which is a lot.
historically, whenever we haven't raised the precept particularly highly, the following year it's been 10-11%.
No, don't misunderstand me. I'm not saying we shouldn't raise it at all, but I think rather than just saying let's chuck 4% here, if we think that we want to add, you know, develop the hardback or whatever it happens to be, we say that's our priority, and then we shave elsewhere. And if we end up raising it by 3% rather than 7%, I think from what I've seen, I've never been in these meetings before, we very easily jump into quite large numbers to clear things. So as they're saying, it would be nice to be ambitious and try and make sure the precepts increase as little as possible. And if that's a larger number than 0, then happy days.
Yeah, but I think there are differences, Chair. capital spend in a one-off year is different to revenue changes. So if we spent £15,000 as a one-off, for example, in the transport study, that will not be another spend in year 2, it will be a one-off spend, and the skate park is capital, would be capital. So I think, in my time, and obviously David's been here, I think we've been pretty good on the financial management front. And the town hasn't been that particularly vocal about certain things that have happened in terms of their precept on the line. So you could either, to be honest with you, we could get rid of the grant budget, we've just discussed, that would save quite a lot of money. We could save loads of money, we could save loads of money, but we'd have no services. So I think you've got to proceed on the basis of putting together a budget where we continue to do the things we do well, and if there are one or two one-offs, then we put them in. And if we don't think the town will tolerate it, then we move them into 2022, 23. So I wouldn't be, I'm less bothered. I'll tell you what, the county or whatever they are now, they're the ones who are going to put the precept up, believe me, by at least 10%.
They're capped, aren't they?
Well, they might be capped, but they're not going to be able to manage social care in the county without certain budget changes. So I think the town council level, our precept is small potatoes. I don't mean that I really don't mean that in a people can't afford it way, but I think in a way that actually there's certain things we've got to do. And we're not profitable, we don't splurge, we spend it wisely, I think. So I wouldn't go on a figure. We used to sometimes think about a scenario where you get 5, 3, 5, 10%, and we look at the numbers, but I'm not sure about particularly doing that. But I think the prioritisation argument is a reasonable argument, because if I want to do a transport study and I'm coming back to council to provide me a decision, do we do it this year or not? And if you do, you've got to regardless of where the money might come from, you've got to underwrite it, otherwise we can't go ahead. If they say no, fine, we'll do it next year.
So do we need to work out what our priorities are?
Yeah.
So
Yeah, because what we shouldn't be doing is setting a budget, and then next year, come the 1st of April, you get your first on a precept, then all of a sudden somebody's got this idea that they want to do so, and we go and have a budget for it. But then we say, we'll just take it from reserves. We should be planning next year now. So you're not, obviously emergencies happen and you have to deal with them.
That's
But
why
for
we're
projects, we shouldn't be banging a project in the middle of the year that's going to cost a significant amount of money. You should be thinking about it beforehand.
absolutely. So estates were asked for priorities last time, but we won't hear those back until the end of October. So do we just come up with a shopping list now? I've got one here of all the projects that I've heard talked about in the last few months, and costs next to them.
Run through it for us.
Run through. There's increases in pay. And there are two things. There's the cost of living, the changes in that, and then if we decide to make any other changes, I've put a number of 15k against that, plus scale changes. The skate park, which I think is important, but the word on the street seems to be that there's a lot of grants around. So I think we should proceed with the skate park as a project, but we should proceed with it on the basis that it will come almost entirely from grant funding. And that's the target.
It's a capital spend, that's a one-off spend.
But if we can get any more of it from grant funding, it shouldn't affect us. So in other words, we don't budget much for it for next year, but we push it.
How much are you planning to
The
budget?
assumption there is that's about 150.
So
That's
you
what
might
I
You'd
have.
probably have to match fund it with something, so you'd have to have some provision.
The rumours seem to be that because of the Olympics, there's a lot of, if it's wrong, then we will have to make decisions.
Yeah, you can go out but every grant, the grant I got for Site Meadow, you have to pay something towards it. So the amount that we paid towards that was the Section 106 money. So we got a contribution.
But the timescale also will take at least a year or so to
Oh, yeah.
to get things through. So I think we can sort of say that's a big priority, but it's not going to cost us much. So
were you saying 150 or were you saying?
I'm saying 150 in total, but certainly the guys we've spoken to have suggested that there are councils that have had all of that provided. Because there's sort of money from Sports England, money from skateboarding, charities, money from, so they match each other. And until we do some work on that, we don't
Yeah.
know.
But
What
you'd
I
have to
know is that
underwrite
they
the
have-
whole amount.
Yeah.
I think you'd have to underwrite the whole amount.
Yeah, the Earls Barton one, they put money in the precepts, they had money from Wellingborough Council, and they had a grant from somewhere else, but they did have to put money, and they had their user group fundraise, so.
That's fine.
How much section 106 money is floating around?
We've got £70,000, earmarked for Fletton Field. Now, my hope is that we get that for nothing, and so then that would free that up. And I'd already inquired at ENC as to whether we could spend that on the skate park, and they said yes. Because it's for outdoor amenities, but we've obviously earmarked that for Fletton Field. And we're not going to know anything about that. Well, next spring, I think we might know.
There's the refurbishment of the toilets, which we've talked in the past of being 60. And it might be 68, it might be less than that.
We have
I'm right.
27,000, so I think we should,
Can we move that forward?
well, I
next
think we
year?
should make a decision to ring fence that for the toilets rather than just put it back into general.
Because that would make the 27 again next year.
Yeah.
Ring fence
27.
is
Keep having a.
I think it's
confirm.
27.
We've got to have some nice toilets.
I've been some pretty rough ones in the last 6 days, trust me. The transport study, which I think is important because that gives us leverage in lots of other ways. We need that data.
15 grand.
That's about 15 grand. Now, that might potentially come out of this year, potentially.
Well, I'm going to ask for it, so whatever the council decides. But it could be something, I don't want to, but it could be something that could move, it could move into next year and still be run successfully from April. The study itself, it wouldn't be the end of the world if they didn't do it until April. And I've spoken to the guys, so 15k is what I'm asking for, up to a maximum of we've got.
The modern world, audio-visual here, down at QVH, there's a whole range of possible solutions. The worst case scenario for everything might be 40 to 50,000, I think, which is quite a lot. But one of the points that was made in here last time with Creative Ambient talking to us was that working in partnership with them might open up grant funding. So again, that might be something we can have ambitions for and work with others to try and get somewhere. So
Yeah, that would only help QVH for that, wouldn't it? With Creative Ambient, if you wanted
Yes,
to run something.
yeah,
here,
absolutely.
yeah.
And there are different options for it.
Yeah.
There's again a price range.
Would that just be done through Queen Victoria Hall then, rather than?
Well, yeah, but that would be just for the Queen Victoria Hall. If we wanted to do anything,
QVH be paying for it, or would OTC be paying for it?
QVH,
QVH.
Yeah, it'd be grant funded.
yeah, so,
But the 40,000 is both buildings, didn't you say?
Depends who you talk to.
Okay,
40
I'm
to
talking
50.
to you, Ian.
And
What do you
I said 40 to 50 for both. I think there are a
but
range
you,
of
we should
solutions.
Yeah,
because
exactly.
the budgets are separate, so
Yep.
what we should be doing is next month, when we're looking at QVH budget, then we put some money into that, so that we can then come back to the council with QVH budget.
I think this building could be sorted for between 3 and 7. maybe a little bit more. But again, it depends on what we decide to do.
Mhm.
These people who I saw at NCAL and work with NCAL, they've got a really clever solution which would work, and it's got microphones and a single camera, and it will be a cheaper solution.
Is that, and then we wouldn't have Blue Moon anymore?
We might be able to do both. I don't know until we have conversations. Snipe Meadow, I don't think there's anything there, but you know that's going to become a key recreational area when that end of town gets even bigger. I don't know, 5,000 on seats. It depends what that housing development does on the path they're going to put through the rugby club that appears in different places and all their diagrams. But we might end up wanting to do something with that. New play equipment for the rec, potentially 8 to 10,000, which has come through the States. Provision for something in the community hub area downstairs, 20 to 30,000 a year maybe.
Sorry, how much?
20 to 30,000.
It's going to be in the first year, it would be at the upper end of that, and after that, the way that I would see it, the person who is appointed, if we go that route, is for them to find the funding to keep it going.
So that'll be year one.
Yeah,
So partnership.
yeah. After that, there's still be money that needs to go in it to subsidise.
You and West Northampton, North Northampton's working together. We talked all about partnerships, solving problems last time. Some sort of wardens or someone to help with the cemetery, a volunteer who gets a stipend, maybe 5 or 10,000 for 1 or 2, because I think we need to improve things down there. When you look at us to other councils nearby, we have a lot of estate, and they have more people dealing with estates, and we have a lot of estates. I think we work our estates too hard.
What's the 5 to 10k cover the cemetery?
Cemetery wardens, it's just an idea.
Would that involve like doing lawn cutting?
Probably more like pruning and looking after stuff.
Would they be volunteers, would they?
I've suggested to estates, but we haven't considered it yet, is the idea of providing them with an annual stipend. So in other words, a small pot of cash to encourage the job to be done. And if you're paying someone, you can also then effectively say you're not doing the job well enough. But it doesn't need to be a big amount. The idea of maybe getting someone else to do extra estates work, because we have got a lot of buildings and a lot of stuff that is working. And I get the sense that we work our estates team really hard.
Yeah.
And they probably don't make the progress they want to. And that feels like something we should try and budget.
Could we get an apprentice, a states person?
Tried.
I think we've had this conversation about apprentices.
Twice,
Yeah,
three
I
times.
know. I think we looked at this, and I'm trying to think who talked about it. And because it's such a varied job,
Yeah.
it's not a,
Fair enough.
yeah.
Can't get a qualification.
You can't get a
that just
qualification,
It's hard to fit in with that
Yeah.
qualification.
Yeah,
So,
fair
How much do you want to spend on?
I can spend loads. I've put 25k as a budget, which seems to be sort of a salary and extra cost, but that might be wrong. Wildflowers and trees, we love trees, we're in a footing. I put 2,000 down there just for fun. Jubilee,
Yeah.
underwriting that,
Right, so
10,000.
Minimum, yeah.
I think that's a minimum.
Wildflower trees, 2,000, because at the moment we're eking out from what we have, but we're using older seeds, so we might, if it works, we might just start some more. And then the Jubilee, I've just put 10,000 down for a nice round figure.
So it's 20.
So I get that to,
this is
130,000 extra.
Most people have it included.
No, I think I might know where we can get a beacon. But a beacon would cost around £1,000.
Yes, yeah.
I think we should get.
So it'll be a beacon.
I didn't like, well, the one at the council at Brixworth where I was there, there's a lovely big, up near the church, lovely big post in the ground. These ones are just like a portable thing, you wheel out with a,
I think we should put one on top of St.
The
Peter's.
Bunsen burner.
Put on top of St. Peter's, so everyone can
that's
see.
going big, so.
Sorry,
Someone
you two.
carries it. So there we are, so I've just spent a quarter of the council's total budget. We haven't got any of the running costs.
130.
So what would that do on the overall
If you-
cost?
It'd be more than 3%.
About 25.
£57 per household on average.
So what band D?
Well, no, that's per average, but of course it doesn't reflect.
So I suppose now, then you, I don't know, you then
130.
prioritise your,
130,000 one.
So some of those, no, they're not all necessarily additional to the amounts that
No,
the
but
council
I-
has already
Capital
given.
spending.
Yes. I think
Some
some
of
of
them
them
are one-offs, aren't they?
They are, and also,
He's
for example,
already
the
given us
toilets.
10,000 on 5131 recreation ground youth activities. I mean, if that
That's
can't
what it
go
would do,
towards,
What's that do towards?
okay, you've given us 21,000 actually, Paul.
33%.
33% on that now?
Yeah.
That's not bad.
No,
Some people might disagree, it's a good
You know,
idea.
and there's a lot of money
But that's why
actually
my-
going
my-
into the cemetery already.
My rolling towns, which I
it
think
was wrong.
Yeah. £1,996.
I mean, that we actually spent that on towns.
As roller towers, it's the hand dryers.
Great legacy.
Oh, right. I was just,
That's it.
Towels, yeah, that's what you
legacy in
Town Square, down in,
Down the courthouse.
There's a contract.
for the people.
Yeah, see,
Don't
we've
they
got-
pay for them through their rent?
Well, they pay their rent, and
By the
they-
town.
They're income.
Yes. But my thinking is, there are some things in the budget that we won't spend this year, and if we specifically roll them over to next year, actually, we could end up with some pretty good projects, some pretty big and important projects for our post-COVID Jubilee year, all that sort of stuff. But wise harvesting of resources this year means that we will potentially get a bit more room next year without hurting the precept too much. That will be my ambition. If we don't need that, well, such is life, but it's worth trying.
We need a clear
And-
picture of the carry forward.
yeah, there are councils, I think, even Blackthorn put their precept up significantly a few years ago to purchase some
Oh, you
land.
got the land, the football
Yeah.
ground, good,
Now,
Right.
if you consult with, if you've got projects and you think, right, this is going to take our precept over to 15%, 20%, if you consult and tell people that this is what you're doing before you do it,
Yeah.
and get a feel of how people feel about it, sometimes you're surprised because people go, well, yeah, if you're going to do that, and I'm going to see that.
Just on that point, I think David made a really important point.
I wasn't there, David was.
You made the point that we need to work out what we do, and I think potentially the last couple of years, in some places, we've taken quite a large precept and we've maybe not quite been sure what we've been doing well. And I think now it's a really good chance for us to say, these are things we do well, these are things we want to do well next year, and unfortunately this is what's going to cost you, but you're going to get really good value. And I think we can make sure that we do tell the people around it that they get very good value.
Yeah.
And that can be a really strong selling point. And maybe this is a really good tool for us to get to that.
Well, just picking up on Charlotte's point, when Blackthorn did survey the village about taking out a public works landlord for part of the funding for the playing field project. The village supported that, so that loan was taken out. I have to say that almost every other penny of a large budget was raised in grant funding from a variety of sources, by Sporting, but by ENC as was, Augean, I think George,
National Lottery.
National Lottery. There is an awful lot of funding out there for projects. So some of these things are projects, very much the sort of skateboard park, but actually doing work within the pocket park and so on. So we should be looking at accessing grant funding wherever we can to fund those kind of projects, or part fund them. As the clerk says, you may end up in a match funding scenario, but if you only find 50% of £5,000, it's not that huge. But I think that list, actually, if you could circulate that amongst all of this, and perhaps actually to all councillors and say, look, you know, this is one of the things the Finance Committee is looking at, so we can all think about it and maybe provide some sort of feedback.
I actually quickly drafted a little Microsoft form earlier that you can move them around in order and put which order you think they should be in. So I'll circulate that and you can all have a little play and we'll see where it goes.
So I'll be able to manipulate it in that.
No, it's very simple. I'll give you a push down.
Can you just put Ian Clark's wish list at the top for them, just so I know?
Dear Santa, your Christmas on the plane. And I think the other point that you made, and again, this, I've never sat on finance before, but again, it feels like sometimes in the last couple of years we've been quite reactive. And we've come up with ideas and tried to work out what we're going to do halfway through the financial year, and it seems that we should be more proactive and say, here are our priorities, here are the things we want to do, and actually looking at the Jubilee process and the transport study, things that they're things that we know to build towards, and we can start putting the costs in and saying, well, that's what's going to happen, and that helps us be more proactive.
So that's a good
That
point.
is
So
why
that
we have a
means-
3-year plan.
It is, but I'm
So
not sure everyone's been aware of it.
so we, yeah, we did use,
Not for your fault.
we did used to have that as a plan, and what we used to do was, at certain times of the year, in the autumn, we would be thinking about capital spend for the next year. And then, because revenue, to be honest, we didn't really mess around with revenue, apart from staff salaries maybe going up and stuff, but it's the one-off stuff, it's the project stuff.
So you have to recognise that occasionally capital spend will then generate subsequent revenue.
Yeah, but what I mean is if you put in new play equipment, it literally is a one-off. If you put in a new skateboard park and you've got maintenance guys or girls, then you can just look after it. If you do a transport study, once every 10 years, there won't be any ramifications. But if you put in AV equipment into here, you've got to manage the AV equipment and everyone's got to know what they're doing. So you're right, but it's just the cyclical nature of how we plan, I think, that we just need to think about.
Is there anyone who wants to add to Santa's wish list?
Yeah, I'd like a much larger beacon than Groundsworth.
A much larger beacon?
No, seriously.
No, I'm sure you are.
The what?
The beacon that the installed.
Oh, yeah, no, we want some, yeah, if we're going to do it, let's do it.
I think that was the cost that was suggested by them.
This is what you just carry, isn't it?
No, it was a metal-y thing.
Yeah, but it was like.
And this is not the forum, but I think being on St Peter's would be cool, but that could be a gas one, and that doesn't fit our climate ambitions, so.
Yeah.
We'll work out what we do or not.
Well, I don't know, but.
And the gas might be much more expensive than the gas one.
Do bit of gas there.
What do we do now? Do we go through it line by line, or?
Well, I'd not at 9:20, to be honest.
That's good news.
I think maybe go away and people can look at it line by line, in your own time. And then we come back in November. By then you'll have had your estates committee. Probably have a bit more of a definite idea of what the estates committee have agreed. And
Just
then-
on that point, can we work out roughly, I know we don't know the future, but what we think that carried over figure might be? So the toilets, for example, so if we can start saying in estates, we think we might be able to squeeze about 10,000 here.
Some of it depends on those. Those are unspent budgets, which
I
is
noticed
why we
those,
can
which
be
are quite
quite
large.
good.
Yeah.
So
Which are they spent those on? Oh, well,
Yeah.
those highlighted at the bottom four. So at the moment it looks like we're going to make about £100,000, but that's only because that money hasn't been spent yet.
So we just need to be very careful.
So if you do spend £27,000 on St Osiris, that will obviously come down. The same with Home Park, Drill Hall, etc.
Drill hall car park, what's the
Drill hall
SO? What's the SO?
So no sign, so that's the toilets.
Oh, toilets.
So there's Drill Hall Car Park 5, Home Park Car Park 5, Drill Hall 5, St Osiris 27, Occupation Road Clubs a grand, Recreation Ground 5, Recreation Ground Youth 10, and Jones Strong Centre 3. So because none of that money's been spent, everything was good.
Tourism, as well, what's?
Christmas lights are
Oh,
technically,
Yeah.
That should be called Christmas lights and Christmas market, because I keep seeing it, brilliant. Oh, no, it's going. I must admit, I'm very boring, but I've gone through all of your spreadsheets and put them on a spreadsheet and added them all up, and it's been really instructive to have that level of detail and work out what we spend and where we could spend things, and there are some big numbers.
Yeah, there are.
So it also can, then we can make decisions in the States, hopefully saying, look, we're careful with this bit through to April. That will help us achieve that a bit better next year. Whereas I think we've got a bit of slack happening on some financial years. Liz?
Before we finish tonight though, I'd like Paul please to explain the section 106 spreadsheet, which I could make nothing of.
Row,
Nothing to me.
in row X, there's some money for,
Row X.
on that one,
Oh, column X.
column X, yeah, column X. There was some money from section 106, Penfield Road, and that's been reduced £3,000 per year. And that is for what's been highlighted to be used for the maintenance, improvement, or enhancement of big open space. We've got 3,393.
So
That's
where
open
is
space
that?
anywhere in Anvil. So it doesn't have to be near Benfield Road,
It'll be anywhere in Anvil, yeah.
so it could go towards play.
This is all part of our reserves, which balanced out at the end of last year at 352.
Yeah.
There's £3,300 which is left from the Creed Road money.
Yeah.
Which can be again spent think that's on the same basis, isn't it?
That's the remainder left from the money that we put towards the crossing.
Oh, then a little bit extra, which they've not quite finished.
So they can be released from reserves, both of those, yes?
If we find something suitable,
Yeah,
yes.
yeah,
then-
yeah, I understand that, yeah.
I'm not sure about the crossing money.
Yeah,
Play equipment.
I don't know. I'll have to have a look again at the agreement. But
the money in revenue reserve is 3 times our monthly expenditure, plus the balance of what was left over from the previous year end. So we have funds available. 25k for NCC that was approved, £25,000 approved of Fletton Field, plus £70,000, which was
So there was
the
an
home road.
underspend, the year-end reserve number there, 139,847, that's underspends in previous years.
Yeah.
So that's money that has been budgeted to spend, that has been raised as a precept and hasn't been spent.
And feasibly, that could be another £100,000 this year if less this time. No, that's just the way it is.
Yeah.
The only one,
I
though.
got it.
Harold comes.
So could we net them off as neutral, take them out of the bottom line then? In
How
terms
do
of
you mean that the north is neutral?
Well, what I mean is in terms of raising the precept amount, do they still,
You can underpin the precept, yeah.
we can knock them, so we can knock down our budget by those amounts because we haven't spent them yet?
In that amount in revenue reserve, but you've got to be prepared that things can go wrong, like you suddenly get a courthouse cost, you suddenly get a toilet cost and so on.
That's normal maintenance,
Yeah.
isn't it?
well, no.
It's a big normal maintenance.
Yeah, it's like,
Roofs,
you know,
walls, what they need.
Recently, I'd spent £40,000 on the room.
Okay.
The NCC services, that's when we were concerned we were going to take over the library and that sort of thing.
Yeah, that's why we put some money, but then we've sort of spent that, because I think we've taken 20-odd thousand from that to,
Something like that.
to go to the Fletton Field money, and then we also spent it on the neighbourhood plan, and a few other things.
And then election, what's the election?
You have to put that in every
Yeah.
case of an election.
No, that wasn't, that's a different one. That was in 2015. There was a decision made to put £5,000 in there all the time through David and everybody else, because you never know,
Yeah,
you might get 2 elections in a year.
Yeah, to run an election.
yeah.
So our preset rise for the last 3 years, can you remember what it's been roughly, percentage-wise?
Can we just finish this column and then we'll go on to the ramifications of it. So
Yeah.
the preset rises is on the sheet. Oh, you
Yeah.
haven't got it, sorry, I didn't write it in.
Okay.
So that 25,000 is to do with,
That's earmarked
That's
for
the
Fletton
Fletton
Field.
Field.
and the 5,000 is the election, takes us to that 352. So,
And that was our year-end balance last year.
and then that's 70,000, which says Herne Road, what's that?
And that was the Herne Road money, which has been,
Earmarked for Fletton Field. We don't hold that
No,
money.
no, no, no.
That's with.
I don't, well,
Or is it?
ENC had it, I'm hoping NC have got it somewhere.
And was that earmarked for anything?
That's earmarked for Fletton Field.
So that's
Oh,
70
that's
and the
70.
25 above are the
Yeah.
funds that we've said we put towards Fletfield if we had to do purchase.
so at our year-end last year, that's how much we had, 352, 240.
Right, brilliant.
So, sorry, my battery's gone, so I can't see it, but what we've seen in the past 3 years is percentage rise on the precept,
There.
starting with this year.
So that's obviously with your large amount of Christmas
Services,
presents from Ian.
yeah,
Um,
Well spent.
2%.
7.31% for the current year, 2% the year before, and so on.
So what's the average, what's the mean of the 3 years?
The average of all those was that 13, 20, an average of 7% for the last 3 years.
Okay.
But every time you try and reduce the precept, Right, it was reduced to 2% in 2019-20, following year up to 7%.
Yeah, so
Reduced the year
it's-
before,
Well,
it's-
policy year
It's
before.
a cyclical annual thing, just
Yeah.
politically to show a low thing, and then it goes up the next.
As soon as
Does it every
Decided
single
to-
tier of government?
1417.
The interesting figure I was looking at earlier is the fact that in 2017, for example, even 2015, we were 336, 387, and we're sort of at 500. You think we've gone up to hundreds of different areas, but
Yeah.
what more did we deliver? I'm not sure we deliver a lot more.
I think the trouble is that what we do is more expensive to do.
No, absolutely.
We have got open spaces, we've got quality buildings now.
But they cost us a lot of money.
Well, yeah, but things cost money, don't they? If you want, we can get rid of
No,
everything.
I appreciate it. But for example, when we had the roof on the courthouse, that was a huge expense.
Yeah, but we could have got rid of it.
But when you look at the courthouse, you think, what do I as a resident of Hanbury get from the courthouse? And when it was a big council building, we got a lot. And now it's offices, we probably get less. So in the end, we've almost become an
It's only
essential
besides the
management.
fact that the museum is in there.
No, that's it.
There are
Which is why that building is still in existence, because if it hadn't been for the museum being there, it would be almost certainly been sold off after we took over this building. There was a public outcry at the thought that the museum would go
But
west.
for example, if we gave the museum the courthouse for £1, and they ran all of the income except themselves, I don't have the capacity for that. But we end up with huge costs.
Well, according to this, the courthouse makes money every year.
It does, but it didn't last year or the year before. So anyhow,
Looks like
But
it
on
did.
the revenue basis, it does.
Whatever we do, it's how we communicate that to the town.
Yeah.
no, that's right.
And it's a bit like, it's like everything else, that publicity and how we sell ourselves as a council is so important out there.
Yeah.
And it stops those people then going, oh, you'll spend that money frivolously. And some of the things that are mentioned there, I can't think of many people that I know that rub any of those issues in what we're trying to do in improving the town and actually putting on things that actually are going to show the town what it is, and you're able to see the publicity we're getting in certain areas. So, and I think just try and keep doing that. But unfortunately, these things come at a cost.
No, that's
we've
right.
already
If we can
articulated that.
flag those costs up, tell people
Early enough.
decisions to be made, etc. It all makes
So we
sense.
stand up at an annual meeting and say, well, this is what we spent on town, ladies and gents. You know, if you want to change any of that, come to the party and join us. And you bring your ideas. So that's
Right,
fine.
it is. Right, it's 9:30 plus. So I'll send that shopping list round in whatever format you want to do that tomorrow. Thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Can you just, before you leave, can we have a resolution to go into closed session again?
Yes.
Or proposal?
I propose that we go into closed session to discuss personal business with the town council.
I will second that. Are you happy to do that? Lovely, thank you very much indeed.
Just,
Any other business, but we're moving that way. Am I?